Welcome back to Purgatorio, the 14th century poem written by Dante Alighieri. In the last episode, our poets walked among the avaricious and the prodigal, those suffering to purge their souls with the counter virtues to their sin. In this episode, Dante and Virgil will tackle the 6th Terrace of Purgatory, the Terrace of the Gluttonous. We'll begin the penultimate terrace of Purgatory by first speaking about the new, third poet of our group, Statius. Publius Papinius Statius was a 1st century poet that lived during the time of Roman Emperor Titus. The man was quite distinguished in his field, winning numerous awards even before his most notable works were created. 2 of these works, which Dante has already mentioned, are the Thebaid and the Aquileid, the latter of which was left unfinished before the poet died. Statius was a native of Magna Graecia, a section of Italy that was populated by ethnically Greek settlers. There he lived in Velia until eventually moving a little further north to Naples. After the death of his father, he migrated further north to Rome. There's already been a couple of incorrect assertions by Dante regarding Statius. Firstly, during the character's introduction, there's talk of him moving from Toulouse to Rome, which we now know to be incorrect. Dante is accidentally confusing his Statius with the French teacher of rhetoric Lucius Statius Ursulus, who lived during the time of Roman Emperor Nero, not Titus. Secondly, Statius wasn't a Christian. There's no classical example of the secret conversion of Statius to Christianity, or some kind of private baptism ceremony that he claims to have had. By all historical accounts, Statius was, until his death, a pagan. Within Purgatorio, Statius is used as a device to allow Dante's teachings to continue past the expanse of Virgil's pagan understanding. Virgil is ignorant to the ways of the Christian faith, and over the last few terraces, we've seen him having fewer and fewer answers for Dante's questions. On the Terrace of Sloth, he instructed Dante to speak to Beatrice about free will, to clarify the aspects that relate to faith. On the Terrace of Avarice, he was just as in the dark about the shaking of the mountain as our living pilgrim. As Dante begins to move more and more into the range of heaven, with its spiritual devices and reckonings, Statius will begin to take more of a centre stage as Dante's guide. It's worth paying attention to the slowly diminishing presence of Virgil and the slowly increasing presence of Statius. Dante is walking behind the 2 ancient poets of Virgil and Statius. They are encircling the mountain on the 6th terrace in their usual direction. Our poet is appreciating and enjoying the conversation between the pair in front of him. Suddenly, the 3 are interrupted by a tree. The tree is growing out from the centre of the path, and upon it are sweetly smelling apples. Dante describes that it looks very much like an inverted fir tree, where instead of its leaves growing thinner towards the top, they do so towards the bottom. He ponders if this is to prevent people from climbing it. The mountainous side of the pathway is blocked, and water is dripping from the rock onto the leaves and branches of our group's newest hurdle. The 3 poets approach to examine the tree. Strangely, the tree begins to cry out.
You will go short of food. Mary gave more thought to how the wedding feast should be completed by using her honor, not her mouth. A mouth which now answers for you in heaven.
This is another reference to the Book of John, describing the wedding feast in Cana yet again. It calls back to when Mary proclaimed that the wedding guests were without wine, caring more for their well-being than her own fulfillment of food and drink.
The women of old Rome, for their drink, were content with water. Daniel despised food and acquired wisdom.
The first of these two references is likely a callback to the ancient author Valerius Maximus, famous for his anecdotes. One of his sayings was that Roman women drink no wine. In this, the tree is presenting these women as exemplars of restraint, choosing to nourish themselves with water alone. The second reference from the tree is an example of self-restraint from the book of Daniel. In the tale presented, Daniel and his compatriots refused the food and wine of the king of Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar II. They instead proved themselves to be healthier, consuming nothing but water and vegetables. God rewarded the group with wisdom, and Daniel in understanding in all dreams and visions. Interestingly, in another tale of Daniel, he interprets one dream of the king regarding a great sheltering tree. The tree next chants of the people that lived in the Golden Age. The Golden Age is a time described in Greek mythology as a period of great balance, prosperity, and health. The tree mentions that during this harmonious time, hunger was satiated by acorns alone, and that simple streams were as thirst-quenching and as desirable as nectar.
In the deserts of Judea, honey and locusts were the nourishing feasts of John the Baptist. Therefore he is glorious and great.
With those final words, the tree goes silent. This tree has presented to Dante examples of the virtue of temperance. Temperance is like self-restraint or self-moderation. It describes the idea of disciplining oneself against the excessive pleasures of worldly goods. We can see that the worldly goods targeted here are food and drink. This tree is this Terrace's whip for the sin of gluttony. Dante is peering dumbstruck into the depths of the once-talking leaves. He compares himself to a bird-watcher, or a hunter wasting his life peering into trees. Virgil, who Dante refers to here as his more-than-father, speaks out.
My son, come now, for the time allotted to us should be bestowed more usefully than that.
The living poet turns to rejoin his two mentors, who are again talking amongst themselves. Dante is enjoying himself, listening to the conversation and walking with them onwards past the tree. All of a sudden, another interruption hits the three. This time, the break in conversation is caused by the sound of both singing and weeping. The words call out, Labia mea Domine, or O Lord, open my lips, lines from the chant Miserere.
O gentle Father, what is that I hear?
Those are the shadows which go, perhaps, untying the knot of their obligations.
Our poets are walking as they listen. They are interrupted again, this time overtaken from behind by a group of souls. These shades are indifferent to our trio, acting like travellers that have no thoughts to consider the people they are overtaking. Dante describes them as silent and devoted, but also apparently emaciated. Our poet begins describing them by speaking of the tale of King Erysichthon, the Greek mythological character cursed with endless hunger by the goddess of famine. No matter how much Erysichthon ate, he was never satisfied. The king starves so much that he ends up devouring himself completely. Dante compares these souls to this mythical king, stating that he doesn't believe Erysichthon to have ever been as dried up as the people he is currently witnessing. Dante next speaks to himself, that walking before him must be the Jews who lost Jerusalem in the ancient siege by Titus. He mentions Mary of Beta Suba, who was left so starved by the horrors of the siege that she killed, roasted, and ate her own baby son. The obvious allusion here to a woman named Mary and her baby in the city of Jerusalem cannot be ignored. Dante continues to describe the souls as they march past him. Their skin shapes itself to the form of their bones. In perhaps a subtle reference to the Gospel of John and another allusion to Jesus, Dante says that the two round sunken eye sockets on their faces help to spell out the letters OMO, an older way of spelling uomo, Italian for man. Pontius Pilate presented the condemned Christ by stating, Ecce homo, behold the man. This terrace is dedicated to the gluttonous, those without temperance. The purgation of sin on this terrace is to be starved and thirsty, reaching for food and drink that is always kept out of reach. The smell of fresh fruit and spraying water in the air squeezes the spirits here to the bone, as they are directly conditioned by divine examples of temperance and gluttony. These spirits could not control their want for sustenance in life, so they are driven to extreme unfulfilled want for sustenance in death. Our poet wonders how it is that the simple smell of an apple and the want of water could be enough to create such an extreme hunger and thirst within these spirits. Just then, one of the gaunt, passing souls turns to face our poet and stares hard, before suddenly bellowing out a joyous cry of the grace he is being accorded. The soul is just as terribly gaunt as the rest. However, upon hearing his voice, the thin figure becomes instantly recognizable.
The spark lit up again, and I saw once more the features of Forese.
Forese Donati was a close childhood friend of Dante and cousin to Dante's wife, Gemma. He was also, unfortunately, brother to Dante's political enemy, Corso Donati, leader of the Black Guelphs. All you need to know about the companionship of Dante and Forese can be summarized in the following tidbits of information. Around 10 years before writing the comedy, Dante and Forese took part in an exchange of written letters to insult one another with poetry. These back and forths contained accusations of sexual performance issues, the vices of their families, and even insults of cowardice. Together they make up a work known as a Tenzone, which are so unlike Dante's other works that they have oftentimes been seen as illegitimate by historians.
Oh, pay no attention to the dry scales which discolor my skin, nor to the way my flesh is wasted away. Tell me the truth about yourself and of those two spirits who escort you. Please, don't stand there without speaking to me.
Dante replies to his friend and expresses his pain at seeing him in such a terrible state. He compares his current sadness to the depression he felt when looking upon his friend's body after he died. Our poet implores Forese to explain what led him to such an extreme condition, stating he cannot answer anything himself until he knows what causes the souls around him to become so thin. Forese describes the method of purging sin here on the Terrace of Gluttony. He references the upside-down tree from a moment ago and the water dripping from the mountainside. It is by command of God, he says, that virtue flows within them both. Through their scent, the great hunger of this terrace is made, and through their scent, the spirits here are made virtuous. Weeping and singing is used to reflect and enhance the solace experienced by the penitents. Forese points out that the approach of souls to the source of hunger is made multiple times as they circle the mountain. He corrects himself during this explanation, displaying that he himself is still quite new to understanding this process. The penitent's driving will to continue is compared by himself to the will of Christ, who accepted his crucifixion by crying out God's name with the expectation of redemption. It is clear that Dante is beginning to see Christ in the suffering of these souls. Dante questions his friend about his positioning in Purgatory, as he only died 5 years ago. How is it that he made it so far up the mountain so quickly, especially if he didn't repent until his death?
What has brought me sweet wormwood taste of these torments is the flood of tears by my wife Nella. With her devout prayers, she has brought me from the hillside and set me free of the other serpents.
Forese continues on a little more about his wife, stating that he loved her and that God loves her for doing so well alone after his death. In Florence, Nella is singularly modest amongst a mob of immodesty. The penitent then makes a prophecy about the women of Florence. He presents their immorality as cause for future anguish. One day soon, he says, preachers will condemn them and forbid their nearly naked dress sense. When they learn what punishments await them, they will howl. Forese clarifies that this great doom will occur very soon. Dante's friend finishes up with a repeat of his original question. How did Dante get to this place in his living body? He draws attention to the other souls around them, now peering at our poet for the same reason. Dante replies that should Forese think back to their time together in life, they will be deeply regretful of their sinful ways. He explains that during a full moon, Virgil, one of the two souls accompanying him, came to pluck him from this life of vice. Virgil has delivered him through the profound night of hell, where souls are truly dead. The ancient Virgil then helped him up the contradiction of Purgatory, the twisting path designed to straighten people out. Finally, noble Virgil will lead him to the promised company of Beatrice. Dante is sure to mention that once Beatrice takes up management of him, Virgil will inevitably be left behind. Our poet points to his ancient mentor and names him to his friend. The progress of our poet through the Terrace of the Gluttonous reminds the reader of Dante's fourth book of Convivio, or The Banquet. Specifically, it recalls a section where Dante speaks of the progression and escalation of desire. Without experience or correct teachings, desires for worldly goods seem better than they actually are. His example speaks of a boy first desiring an apple. Then the boy desires to own a little bird. Next, he desires clothing, and then women. We have seen references to all of these in that order on the terrace so far. The purpose of this part of Convivio is to present the notion that none of the desires sought by a person are fulfilling. The person will still seek for greater and greater things in the hope of finding fulfillment down the road. We can compare Convivio to the path that these souls take. Souls elect to approach the apple tree only to be repeatedly denied the physical object of their desire. They then continue on their endless path, seeking fulfillment where there is none to be had. Unhindered by their simultaneous conversation, the three poets and Forese move along the terrace.
We pushed on, just like a ship blown by a favorable wind. The twice dead-looking shades peered at me through sunken eyes. They wondered of me when they perceived me still alive.
That's it, thanks for watching this episode. We've recently got back into social media here on the channel, so check out our social links in the description for more history content. As always, I'll catch you in the next episode. Toodles!